Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power is not enough, but it's above your pay grade.
Scott Ritter is the former Marine Corps intelligence officer and the most famous weapons inspector in the history of the world.
Somehow the United States and NATO have gotten into their thick skulls that embracing a policy that seeks the strategic defeat of Russia in Ukraine is a harmless policy, that there's no consequences for their action. All the people that post this and postulate this and say this is what we want, you are literally by definition creating the conditions for the release of Russian nuclear weapons. This is part of the lowering of the threshold for the release of nuclear weapons that's taking place both in the West and another one. Jan Stoltenberg says, we're going to take 24 of these 100 B-61 bombs we have sprinkled around Europe, and we're going to put them on operational standby. That means they're not sitting in a nuclear weapons locker under key, and decisions have to be made to pull it out, to activate them, et cetera. No, they're going to be ready to rock and roll, ready to be put underneath an F-35A or an F-16 that belongs to one of any number of nations. It used to be just 5, but now the NATO nuclear deterrence people are saying anybody that has an F-35, including Poland, by the way, when they get them, or an F-16, can now opt into being a nation capable of delivering nuclear weapons. This means that every time one of these aircraft take off from a NATO airfield, Russia has to assume they carry a nuclear weapon. And of course, if it's the F-35, it carries it in weapons bays underneath, so you can't physically tell. Let's say that 3 of these take off and now come screaming towards the Belarus border or the border with Ukraine or in the Baltics in some sort of, manly demonstration of force to Russia. Russia has to assume that they're carrying nuclear weapons. And the closer they get, the closer to the threshold of Russia's own hair-trigger nuclear response we get. And we haven't even talked about the fact that in 2026, the United States and Germany have reached an agreement for the reintroduction of intermediate range missiles back onto European soil. That weapons that I got rid of. This is why it's a little personal to me, George. I know I'm getting a little hot under the collar and a little angry here, but I was part of the process, the people, the team that got rid of what was then the greatest threat, not only to European security, but global security. Because here's the other thing I'm going to tell your European audience. There's no such thing as limited nuclear warfare. None whatsoever, especially when it comes to the potential of NATO American weapons being used against Russia. A nuclear weapon used against Russia on Russian soil is the equivalent of Russia firing nuclear weapons at the United States. Russia will respond with the totality of its nuclear arsenal, destroying everything in Europe and everything in the United States it can't possibly reach. And now we're talking about putting back these weapons that have the potential of carrying nuclear weapon or warheads. The ground-launched cruise missile has a nuclear warhead that's in storage right now. Right now, we don't keep it on the weapon because of the caps provided by the Strategic Nuclear Force, a New START Treaty. That expires February 4th, 2026. After that point, the cap is gone. We will bring all these warheads out. The ground-launched cruise missiles will have nuclear warheads. And now Russia's looking at a situation where when you talk about protocol, the protocols are built on a presumption that the president will have between 15 and 30 minutes. The Russian protocols are similar, 15 to 30 minutes to make a decision. When you introduce intermediate nuclear weapons into Europe, especially hypersonic Dark Eagle weapons, the Russians now have 6 minutes. There ain't no protocol for 6-minute coordination. The only option Russia has at that point in time is to hit the button and launch everything, or preempt, which is another thing Russia's looking at. We have created the conditions where Russian nuclear doctrine is going to be triggered. We have lowered the threshold for the use of these weapons, and we're doing everything humanly possible to front load scenarios that put Russia on the defensive, where Russia either has to preempt with their own nuclear weapons what they deem to be an imminent nuclear weapon attack by the United States, or have a hair trigger response if they detect something coming their way, and they will fire everything in response. When I look at this, and I knowing human beings as I have, and knowing the history, I mean, people understand we've come very close in the past to having accidents that lead to nuclear exchange. I'm not confident that we're competent enough to ride through this period of time. In fact, I believe just the opposite. I believe that people don't believe that Russia has a nuclear doctrine that is real. They view it as a bluff. They view it as a fake, and they're willing to push the boundaries in hopes that Russia folds like a house of cards. Now, Russia won't fold, and if we continue in this direction without interruption, I personally believe that the summer of 2026 may be the last summer any of us enjoy on this planet. Now, as you said, I've been doing this for a while. This is something that I know an awful lot about. I know the mindset, I know the policies, I know the procedures. And when I put it all together, we don't have the checks and balances in place to prevent a nuclear war. If we allow things to go forward unchecked as they are now, the summer of 2026 is going to be a very, very dangerous period of time. Normally, you'd like to believe that rational thinking humans, people with a modicum of sanity would step in and do the right thing, put in place the political impetus that led to the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Put a marker on the table that had political viability, that resonated politically, that said, we will not tolerate this. And so the forces that be had to take that into consideration. And in the pause that exists between your act of absolute brilliant citizenship and the signing of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in December of 1987 by Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the people who make these decisions reflected on the danger that these weapons produced, and they agreed, we need to get rid of them. And we did get rid of them. So we need that today, but where are the people? Where are the people? People believe today, right now in America, we have an election coming up. If nuclear weapons, if preventing nuclear war is not on the agenda, if we're not compelling the candidates to talk about what their plan is for peace, for preventing nuclear war, for promoting arms control, then whoever is in the office won't be able to do anything between 2026. If we can get enough Americans to commit their vote, not to a person or a party, but to an issue, preventing nuclear war. And if we get enough committed votes in the swing states, let's say, because Michigan is going to go 10,000 votes one way or the other. If I can get 50,000 commitments, we're now politically viable in Michigan. And now we have between September 28th and November to force these people, if you want to win Michigan, put this on the table.
Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't.